Welcome to Chess on the Brain. So I want to look at round 7 between MVL. I'm going to butcher the names, but I think it's Maxime Vachier-Lagrave versus Ian Nepo. So MVL from France against Nepo from Russia. So this was a really interesting game. French defense. And one of the funny things is that you have players, let's say in one round, I think it was Wang Hao. He played the Russian defense, or the Petrov, against Nepo from Russia. And then now we have a Russian player who plays the French defense against a player from France. And it didn't. In this case, it didn't work. So he was able to beat his country's own defense. And I'll go back to the saying from Philidor, the French predecessor of Lagrave, which is that pawns are the soul of chess. And we're really going to see how important pawns are in this game. This is just a great example. You know, in the French defense, when you have a closed French after the pawn pushes to e5, you know, pawns are definitely going to be critical in terms of where the pawns are aiming, what side of the board you can play on. And this is a really nice example, actually, of dual, I guess I'd call it dual flank play, playing on both flanks. Ultimately, though, what's your goal? Is if your pawns are aiming toward the king side, well, you should play where your pawns are aiming. And he is going to make that happen. But at the same time, he's going to stop his opponent's play on the queen side, which is generally where black wants to play. So MVL is playing with the white pieces. And we have Nepo, or we'll call it Ian, is playing with the black pieces. And let me just make sure we're good on the screen. Are we? Okay, that was the other one. Yeah, I think we got it. Yep. Okay. So E4. Thanks for bearing with me on that, and I hope everyone's doing well, staying healthy. So E4, E6, and actually, as you probably heard, they canceled or postponed this FIDE candidates tournament after 7 rounds, so halfway through, you know, due to the coronavirus. So this was the only major sporting event that I'm aware of that was still going, and they stopped this one too. At least they got 7 rounds in, but hopefully they can continue it pretty quickly. So E4, E6, French defense, D4, D5. Knight C3, Bishop E4, whenever variation. So MVL, of course, is prepared with something against this. He goes E5, and now becomes advanced whenever variation. C5. Of course, in the French defense, you want to strike back and attack the D pawn. Try to break up that center. So again, as for pawn play, fundamental, right? Black's pawn's a little more compact, but black's pawns are aiming towards the queen side. Very solid structure. You want to strike back here, and you want to, and in the whenever variation, you're going to pin the knight. But keep in mind that it's an aggressive option. But anytime you play aggressively, there's generally going to be a little bit of a trade-off. In this case, what do you think it is? Well, the bishop came to b4 and gets kind of closed out. It's going to have to trade off after a3. Now, the absence of the bishop means that the dark squares inside of Ian's position are pretty weak. Look at that g7 pawn. And if you ever have to move that pawn, that's really weak on f6. And, well, in this case, you don't have to worry about the knight. In some cases, if the knight's still on c3, it will get into d6. But this is still a weak square. Imagine if the bishop gets on this diagonal or reaches this diagonal. You know, there's going to be some serious weaknesses. So it's really instructive. I want you just to look at how Maxime goes about this, you know, playing with the pawn structure and you know, going on the advice of Philidor to really focus on the pawn structure and how he can get control of key squares and also the side of the board ultimately that he plays on. When you have these pawns like this, generally white wants to go for the f4, f5 break, crack it open there, and black already gets his break in instantly with c5. And yeah, I mean, you got a little bit of weakness here. Your pawns are split. Got some doubled pawns here. So black is going to try to create some pressure against this. A lot of times the bishop will actually come to a4 to target c2, and the queen will go to c7 and stuff like that. So yeah, white needs to still be careful. But he's also going to try and play queen g4 and things like that to generate some real pressure on the king side, as you'll see very quickly. Knight comes out, h4, there we go. I don't think this is the main line. Maybe he's doing this to throw his opponent off a little bit, and it's a very direct idea to play here. Now you might say, oh, this is not developing move, you're not developing your pieces. Well, keep in mind that in a closed game, it's a relatively closed position here. When the center is closed up, you can do some maneuvers. You can take your time. You know, you don't have to be in a big rush. I mean, of course, the center can open at any moment. You have to be ready. But you can take a little time to put things on the right place. So queen c7, h5. All right. Well, what's the threat? Basically, h6 I think should be seen as a threat. This is really, it's a positional threat. Why? Well, it's going to hit g7 obviously, but if you have to play g6, again, look at this kind of thing. If you don't play h6, let's say he does like knight c6, just some random move. Okay, h6. Now, if you take it, that's just terrible, right? We cannot allow this kind of infiltration, even with the rook, but this kind of infiltration in here, and you're going to end up winning the h-pawn too. This is just terrible, right? Yeah, all the pieces are going to come in and exploit these weaknesses. So, after h6, rook to b1. Well, pretty standard, right? It makes a lot of sense. Common sense. Get your rook on the b file. Put some pressure on b7. Also, it's a tactical point too. Let's say he does something. Let's now say white does something random, like just a random developing move like knight f3. Now, actually, that might be helpful for him, but because in this case, for example, there's this fork, but you have bishop d2. So actually, knight f3 would be effective because it would guard d4. Let's do an even more random move. So just to show you just to show you some vulnerability. I don't know, knight h3 to come to f4, something like that. Well, now this is less effective because here I think we'd have to worry now about this. Just doesn't look too comfortable starting. You don't want to lose too many pawns. I mean, a lot of times white does sacrifice, but you don't want to lose the whole center. And by the way, in this game, this is not all about the lines. If you want to, you can plug it into a computer. This is about the ideas. That's what my streams are really about. If you've seen any others, it's really about the ideas, the takeaways that, in terms of how you handle the pawn structure, how you're approaching planning, things like that. That's what I hope you'll get from this channel. Okay, so rook b1, and I just really like this game, so I hope you enjoy it too. Let's get into it. So b6, okay. b6, now what's the idea? Well, a lot of times in the French, black wants to trade off the so-called bad bishop. It's not going anywhere, right? So now it can go, when it's just stuck in here. So now it wants to go to a6, trade off white's good bishop, which wants to be active on d3. So he's going to try and get rid of that. Now, it's going to immediately apply pressure. Now, keep in mind, these pawns, they're like wedges. They're wedging into your opponent's position and fixing their pawns in place. This is stuck, this is stuck. Keep in mind, this is actually a mating net, This is a checkmating net for black's king. So he has to be very careful because in certain lines where you might do a sacrifice, or if you ever do achieve f4, f5, and you get in there somehow, these lines start opening up, these pawns are going to greatly restrict Nepo's king. So he's got to be real careful here. He just guards. He doesn't want to give him this. You cannot collapse these pawns. If these collapse, it's over. That's just over. If you get to take g7, you get to take h6, and you're going to run the pawn. You're going to move the bishop out of the way. You're going to run the pawn, get a queen. I mean, it's that simple. You cannot lose these pawns. So he's got to defend this. And you'll see, because of this, he's really tied down. The rook is doing the babysitting job that a pawn wants to do. See, pawns don't mind babysitting each other. You don't want a powerful piece like a rook having its sole purpose in life is to defend a pawn. That's just sad, right? So bishop b5 check, and that's what Maxime is taking advantage of here. King f8. Okay, he moves his king. So as we see, he wants to go bishop here. Now this is actually also interesting because notice the vulnerability. Do you see how the bishop can be trapped on b5? Maybe pause it. Think about a strategy that black can employ to trap the bishop. So take a pause. Think about that if you want to place yourself. It would be c4, right? If you allow c4, you're just going to lose your bishop. A6 is coming, and oh, not there. And then b. Can't make an illegal move, but you can. No matter what you do, you're still going to get trapped, right? Because the pawn's on c4. So the bishop will get stuck. So he actually comes back, but he's achieved his objective. I mean, the king had to move. He can't castle. And again, this is kind of the danger zone. Remember, we always want f4, f5 in this fundamental structure with the pawns aiming toward the king side. We want f4, f5. And if we can achieve that with the rook on f1, perhaps, or maybe it goes this way, but we get this break-in, and this is very uncomfortable for this target king on f8. Meanwhile, how do you get to this king? We'll see. It's not so easy. You have to get to c3 or something, but you always go bishop d2. Sometimes the king even goes to d1. So it's not easy to get to the king. Okay, bishop a6. Well, he's going to trade off the bad bishop. Okay, he achieved that. And d takes c5. And he takes on d3. I'm not really sure about that. I think he should have actually taken back with the pawn. He may have been worried about this idea. You see the tactical idea for white here? It looks like you get a tactic, you get two pieces for him, but once again, same thing, right? c4. Oops. You just lost the exchange after all. So it's not actually going to help him out. So bishop takes d3, he takes back. He says, okay, fine, you traded off your bad bishop. I got to trade off my bad pawn to undouble it. Okay, weak pawn on a3 maybe, but not a big deal. This is actually reinforcing pawn to come to d4, as you'll see. Well, first we need to deal with the e5 square. Okay, so we play d4. Once again, we have this without dealing with the doubled pawns. When he takes back, okay, well, we still have these, oops, not there. Still have the issues on the c file. You have to watch out. But this bishop, temporarily not so good, but just keep in mind, this is a long-term asset for Maxime if he ever plays a4 here. And just, you know, kind of this annoying pressure on the h-pawn in case there's ever a sacrifice in conjunction with the queen or something. You'll see. Nice little maneuver here. Queen d1. It looks so strange, right? But again, remember the principle of closed center, allowing you to do maneuvers such as this. So queen goes to d1. Queen goes to a5. I'm thinking, well, applying pressure also probably doesn't like the idea of queen a4 at some point, so he's just kind of taking that off the table for Maxime. Well, he does this. He sacks the a pawn. We can look into it, but I just think that it would give him a big initiative. The rook can reach b7, and he can even go to a1 if he takes. But it's just kind of a waste of time, and Maxime is like getting the b file. He's going to just keep developing like he did in the game with 92. He can even castle, and he can still play f4 and try to get his action going on the king side. And he's just, again, just like in the game, this dual flank action. You're going to see really nice play on both sides. Now, that's typical when the center's closed. Again, there's so many features of a closed center that's important to know, because a lot of players, maybe, I don't know what the rating would be, let's say 14, 1500 up to like intermediate level. One of the big things that might be lacking, if you haven't read certain books, might be lacking is the understanding of how to handle closed positions. You know, you could study a King's Indian, you could study the French, that's good to know, but you got to be flexible. Whatever the pawn structure is, when it's closed, you got to know where the action is based on the pawn structure. And keep in mind this potential for opening of lines. So it's really a differentiator if you can become good at, you know, you're not afraid to go into these closed positions and know how to maneuver them effectively. So he challenges the b file for, okay, Nepo, so 92. Now, why didn't he go to f3? Well, once again, we have the f4 idea, right? If you go to f3, you're kind of just blocking yourself, and it's not in accord with any plan, right? In accordance with your plan. So 92, okay, well, c4. This is a very committal move. He's completely closing the center, very committal, right? Completely closed, and it's obvious black's play is going to be over on the queen side, white's play should be on the king side. But keep in mind, it's almost like a prophylactic measure to do a little play on the queen side. I was just looking at a Fischer game, Fischer versus Pano. Fischer-Pano, what was the year? I forget the year. It was in Argentina. Fischer versus Pano, very nice attacking game. And Fischer, similarly, he attacks on the king side, but he does a little action with rook c1 in that game to neutralize the c file. In this game, Maxime does a little action on the b file, and he can go to b4, and he neutralizes the b file before proceeding with his final assault on the king side. Now, he keeps his options open, because what's the main problem? Try to figure out what's the main problem with Ian's position. Well, the king doesn't, maybe not ideal. It could be attacked, especially after the opening of lines. What about that rook? Like Agard says, Jacob Agard, and you know, like positional play. I recently read a lot of that positional play in some of his other books. He talks about the 3 questions, right? One of the questions is, what are my worst pieces? What's my worst piece? What's my worst piece? Where are the weaknesses? What's my opponent trying to do? It'll help you, it'll inform you as to what to do in any given position. Now, with the rook on g8, that's clearly the worst piece. What's white's worst piece? Probably this. Yeah, this isn't doing too much, but it's easy to activate. This one's a little harder to activate. Okay, all it's doing is aiming at h6, and that's not going to be consequential yet. Maybe you can sack it, but it's not consequential yet. Maybe a bayonet attack. Those are all, you know, those are all on the table, but we have another idea for the bishop, you'll see. So he castles. Now this is nice, right? He said, okay, I had my action over here with h4, h5. Now my rook actually wants to be at f1. 2 purposes in particular. Well, the king is castled, it gets out of the way. The rook is able to connect with this rook on the next move. Right? Connect your rooks. Something that our opponent is not able to do, again, because his king's in the way. So king and rook are both problematic here. And the third thing is it prepares what? You should know by now. f4, f5 push. Okay, knight's in the way, we'll deal with that. But we want to get this push. It's incredibly strong. So rook on f1 can help with this other rook, can help with our b file control, and can help with our f file. So again, it's part of this dual flank action, and this castling move fits perfectly into his plan. It's just really nice, really elegant game. Okay, rook h8. I guess he was a little intimidated by this idea. Maybe some sacks here. Also trying to push the h-pawn if you sack. So he goes rook h8, a4. Now he's like, okay, no more free pawn for you. You can't take my pawn anymore. and deeper idea. First he goes rook b4. Okay, you don't really want to take. This is just ugly, right? There's very mobile pawns, and you can start pushing them, right? So, and it's just like, okay, you completely shut down, oh, not there, you completely shut down the play on the queen side. So this is great for Maxime if it happens. Okay, well, Ian goes knight c6, obviously attacking the rook, right? Oh, not so much. f4, really, I think this is the most beautiful move of the game. Probably my favorite move of the game. Second, there's one other one too. But f4, okay, just relentlessly proceeding with his plans. Now, the knight attacks the rook on b4, right? Or does it? Like I said, I mean, you're sacrificing for initiative, right? Say, go ahead and take me if you want. I'm going to take back. You're basically going to have to sack the exchange back. He goes knight back. He's so afraid of this f-pawn. Let's just look at it real quick, just to show you the ideas. Takes, take. Now, if you want to keep your exchange, let's say you go back. Well, first of all, your queen's out of play, right? If it was here, she could at least go back. Well, she can go back this way, but she's a little out of play for now. And now you're still going to get your f5 in. Huge initiative. And you could start, you get maybe work for a passed pawn on this side of the board. Mobility. You've got your mobility over here. You've got maybe knight f4 coming, this coming. And also, if you take here, he takes back with the pawn. You get the open f-file, you get queen g6 check. I mean, this is disastrous. Again, we don't care about the exchange, right? I do care about the pawns in this case, which is because why? Because it will help us get into our opponent's territory, and we're going to be able to move the h-pawn to get a queen. So this is really, it's amazing how important the f and h pawns become in this position. And these wedge pawn, the wedge pawn on e5 is still there. And we have our mobility, and black has very closed, very close lack of mobility for him. Yeah, he's up in exchange, but he can't use his exchange, so it's irrelevant. It's moot at this point, right? So f4. So he goes back. He realized, even the computer, I was just looking at it. I'm like, well, what happens if he takes? The computer at 3 moves did not even recommend Stockfish did not even recommend knight takes b4 in his top 3 moves. It's just not a move you want to make. Okay, so he realizes the strength. He goes back. So he's like, okay, fine. If you want to try to sack the exchange, at least let me get rid of your f-rook, which is a powerful attacker. So he doesn't push yet. Okay, he goes. He just doubles now. He says, okay, well, let's shift our pressure to the b file for now. So it's just such a comfortable position for Maxime at this point. Queen's very active. Main problem is our bishop still, right? The rooks are really well placed. The queen side is like just completely under control. That's it. Remember, that's Ian's main play is the queen side. What has he achieved? He's committed so much. He's hoping for some b-file action. He didn't even get the a-pawn. He's not getting anything. Meanwhile, his rook is still stuck out of the game. 5 points doing nothing. f5. So he's hoping to lock it up. Now, this was a really deep move to not take en passant, because, I mean, it's very tempting to take en passant. But first of all, you give the knight a lot of play. Like, why do you want that, right? You get a target here, but it's not so easy to hit it. You give too much counterplay. And the other thing is that he likes his wedge pawn. Only if you understand the position and you know that you can still open the game, which you can. Let's look at how. Rook b5, queen a6. Beautiful idea as well. I mean, it's really a classic game. This was probably my favorite game of the tournament. I just think it's a positional masterpiece. I mean, for a grandmaster, it's maybe easy at this point, but he built up very nicely. The exchange sacrifice was bold and very nice, but really, it was a wise decision, and he clearly could back it up positionally, and in terms of his attack. But what about the bishop? Okay, well, we have 2 ways, right? C1 or E1. Well, we talked about this diagonal, so let's just go there. Bishop C1, king F7, bishop A3. Awesome, right? Look at that. Look at that pressure now. Everything, just about everything is in play. We'll work on our knight. We'll work on that next. But you see, you'll notice grandmasters, top-level grandmasters in particular, they always know what to do with their pieces. It's in line with their pawn structure, what the pawn structure demands. Figure out, okay, we got to get some play on the B file. We got to work on this diagonal. We got to go for something. He's going to play for F5. You say, what? Wait. How is he going to play for F5? There's a pawn blockading. There's a knight here. Okay, that's actually kind of an illusion. It's deceptive. Okay, he doubles his rooks. We've neutralized the B file. We might have to trade off our rooks, but our attack is not going away. Wait, you say, why is he giving up his awesome bishop? He just worked so hard for this knight, which is purely defensive, doing nothing. Look at this. Again, I'd recommend pausing it. Just a fun move to try to find. Okay, well, white to move. How do you attack? Really building up a strong advantage, but you have to make something decisive happen. Okay, what do we do now? G4. Busted open, right? So yeah, we are actually going to play F5, and we have knight G3 follow-up. Okay, who cares about the pawn? This is not even a sacrifice. It's a pseudo-sacrifice, right? If you take, It's just you're gaining out of it. I mean, you have queen g6 or h7, probably g6. This should fall. You have like f5, knight f5. I mean, it's just knight f4. It's just too much. I think you can probably guarantee the win of this pawn, actually, with queen h7. So, I mean, taking the g pawn just loses your g pawn. And again, h pawn will fall. F5 is coming. This is weak. The knight's coming in. It's overwhelming. And also keep in mind that whenever this gets traded, then this one becomes weak. So if the knight comes in, if the knight comes in, let's say you get into here, you can win this one too if you collapse this. So these are collapsing. These are collapsing. The king is under attack. It's awful. And so what happened is rook takes b5, a takes b5. Okay, so effectively he's sacking a pawn on the other side of the board. Not really, because he still gets the f pawn, and he's going to stay on this diagonal. Now, when he takes, simple chess, you don't take back with your queen. Of course not, because why would you do that when you have no follow-up with your queen? We want to use our knight. So the whole point was that we didn't need to move our knight right away. We move it when it has a perfect way to enter the game decisively. So knight g3, queen b6. No thanks, we're not trading queens. We take with check. I guess if you go here, then you're probably going to run into knight takes g7. We could trade queens and just come back. And then actually, that's awful. You would take on g7. You know, king goes up. Let's say you trade queens. You come back, and then you're going to pick off the h pawn. Yeah, it's just too much. And you can easily bring your king over. You can stop the a pawn with your knight or your king. Not, you have to be careful, but it should be fine. Okay, so king f8 to defend that. No thanks. Again, we're not trading. We can use this again. We can use this highway. Highway was for the bishop. Now it could be used for the knight, or for the queen rather, and the knight can support the queen. So we have this awesome queen-knight combo. And again, a funny thing, it's kind of parallels throughout the tournament. So Nepo was playing against, I think it was against Wang Hao. He played in an earlier game, like 2 or 3 rounds earlier, where he had a knight and queen against knight and queen, and he won that game. Now he's on the bad side of that. So it's just kind of interesting in terms of what openings they choose, in terms of the setups they get, types of piece configurations. So queen e6. Okay, knight goes back to g3. Now, no big deal. You just retreat. You're guarding this. f5 is coming. Okay, just guard this. We're giving up the f pawn, get rid of the a pawn, but it's decisive. It doesn't matter, right? This pawn doesn't matter on f4 anymore. It's that you're in here, you're attack, your initiative. This is weak. The knight's always ready to hop in. Remember, this is also a wedge pawn. Holds off these 2 pawns, keeps them very restricted. And this check is nothing, right? Checks and move, just go h3, no more checks, and you got to deal with the queen now. So obviously this queen on a7 is a lot more intrusive, a lot more annoying than the queen on f4. It's really, this one's really making the true threats. So it's almost over now. King e7, and he checks him, and then he invades on d6. Now what's the threat? Well, impending threat of d6. You just have to, you have to worry about this, and you're going to play e6 very soon. So you just have to try to get the queen off of the diagonal. But basically, she's completely tied down, and you could just pick off the pawn anytime you want. And it's like, you just ask your opponent, okay, what now? So he tries g5. I mean, I don't know what else he has. I don't know, move your king. And I think he just takes this and takes with check, and everything falls. So, and this was a weakness on c3, but if he gets these pawns, well, we can sack the c pawn at that point. Who cares? But you're also guarding it. So it's just like everything is in his favor, and this knight is just super uncomfortable, whereas this knight is completely fine. So Ian tries g5. Okay, I mean, now he takes advantage of the en passant rule. H takes g6. Again, with the French theme, right? I should have had French music on this too. Everything is French theme today. So H takes g6 and h5. Okay, just sort of desperation, right? h5 g7. There's no, he resigned. There's no stopping it, right? h5 g7. You're threatening to. No, you can stop the pawn temporarily, but you can't stop this as well. Remember, we had this pin for Nepo. Well, if he does like the computer recommended best move, I think was g5. Okay, whatever. You just go e6, threatening mate. And I mean, anytime you want, you can cash in with a liquidation here. But we don't need to liquidate. We just move off. And we're threatening this. So the queen could go like, say, tries to trade. Okay, we just take this. Just the threat is greater. Okay, to bring in another quote, Nimzovich, the threat is greater than the execution. We don't need to execute here. We just make more threat. Just keep the threat alive. We don't even need the c4 pawn. We'll just take this one, though. And this one's going to fall, too. Okay, you want to take your time for this? Okay, now the knight's going to come in. You're never going to hold this pawn. And I think now I would just cash in, probably. Like, if he goes, I don't know, here. Yeah, I would probably just. This is simple enough win, right? This is very easy. Takes, 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 takes. There's no way he can hold this. You can win this. This is, I'm pretty sure it's just a straightforward win without the knight. but the knight just makes it even easier. Something like this, that's game. We can actually just use our knight to win the pawn if we want, or you just whatever. I mean, this is gonna fall, or you could go here and you take that, easy win, right? Push the pawns down. So yeah, it's just a really nice game. You know, just this concept. Okay, so it's a nice example of how to play against the French defense, the win-over variation. Little maneuvers like this was nice. Make the king move, and then he just ties him down to this point, and eventually make him worry about h6 too, and eventually there's f4, f5. But doing so really effectively, and again showing you he can maneuver in close positions. But then when the time comes, we got to finish our development and get ready for action and also covering both flanks. But then with our f4, f5 idea, willing to sacrifice the exchange to carry out our strong ideas. Being insistent on that, you know, you have to insist on your ideas. Have strong ideas. Don't give in. Even if you have to sacrifice a pawn of the exchange or some small amount of material, is worth it. Just to have a strong initiative and be able to follow through on your idea. And at this point, again, knight and queen was just winning as we saw. So really nice game. And let me make sure this actually worked. It's time to live studio. And all right, under half an hour, we were able to cover it. So hopefully that was helpful. I'm not sure, is it showing? Oh, hey, how's it going? Mobile Gamers is back. Okay, let me know if you have any questions about it. But I just thought it was a really cool game. I think I would say my favorite so far from the first half of the tournament, and hopefully we'll get more action soon enough. We have to take a little break now while the coronavirus passes whenever it does. Yeah, in the meantime, I guess it's online chess for us. So it is what it is. But stay healthy, everyone, and looking forward to seeing the remaining 7 rounds later on. Okay.